We're wearing the headband for Cam Newton, and all we're doing is thinking about the base rates chapter from the Analytics of Dynasty 2020 edition. It is almost like the 2020 edition of the Analytics of Dynasty was written for nights like this. The odds that Jarrett Stidham was going to get through to be a full-fledged fantasy starter, 10%. Cam Newton, with the top 6 numbers on his resume, out there, we're looking guys in his comp set north of 70%, 78% is his dynamic density rate. Jarrett Stidham, 10%. I'm Jordan McNamara. Welcome to the Patreon Sunday Night Live show. I think this night's really interesting in terms of that, in terms of the analysis. I will say on the flip side of this, right? So these situations are interesting because there's a couple of questions, and there's a couple of questions popping up in the live show chat. Feel free to jump in there. We will talk about that as sort of, this is going to be a Cam Newton centric show. I might even cut a Cam Newton podcast looking at trades later this week once we sort of see some more stuff. As we sort of flush out the rest of the June and into July value series. Listen, I say this a lot about Dynasty, and I very firmly believe that this is true, that the most contrarian strategy in all of Dynasty is to be patient. And what do we see good teams do consistently? I mean, consistently the Patriots are patient. Consistently, they sort of let the early phase of free agency work itself out, and then they sort of hector the collector, all the bargains that come in at the end. I mean, that is a consistent historic trend that they have had. It's smart on them in terms of getting a good bang for their buck, return on their money, return on the investment. I've heard and seen some people say, "Oh, this is just the suspension or the penalties come out, they lose the draft pick, and oh look, now they go out and sign Cam Newton. Now they're going to get a comp pick back. It's going to cost them nothing. Yada yada." This, I mean, I don't know how long his asking price has been the veteran minimum with $7 million potential. In terms of bonuses, I think it's 7.5 is what's been reported, something to that effect. I don't know how long it's been that, but there's 31 other teams that could have picked him. 31 other teams that could have signed him to a veteran minimum. Maybe that's not entire that could have signed him for a reduced cost. Now we know what the cost was. I'm sure someone would have paid more than this. I mean, if you're Chicago right now, I mean. You trade for Nick Foles, right? I mean, Oakland goes out, the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders go out and spend big money on Mariota to be, one of the most expensive backups in the league. And you're going to get a Super Bowl MVP, NFL MVP on basically a veteran minimum just because you waited a couple of months. Like, it's amazing. Then sometimes it always seems to be, this is true in Dynasty. Playing the long game, playing the patience game, it's very contrarian and can have really, really high outcomes. I will say, I think positively of Cam Newton. I think this is a classic case of how you think about this is really important. And I was thinking about this more and more over the weekend. Someone put out a tweet basically asking, what's the one thing that really drives you crazy about fantasy analysis? And I said expressions of certainty, right? Because these things all happen on a continuum, right? Just because he signs doesn't mean he's quarterback 6 in scoring, right? There's a range. There's a range that goes from him being a top 6 scorer to him not starting, right? And that's a wide range of outcomes. So if you're consuming content, if you're, the best part about this for me in terms of this Patreon experience is I can get these things out quickly. I can get them out, right? I can sort of have an initial take, not to be hot takey, but to be actionable, right? To have some thoughts out there. But I think a critical part of that is you need to be flexible, and you need to understand that the price of something yesterday is going to change tomorrow, and the price of something at 5:30 this afternoon is going to be different tomorrow. What could have been a buy situation 4 hours ago, 4 minutes from now might be a sell situation, right? And this is a classic case of this. So you're seeing hyperbole, and these things happen. We've been cooped up for 4 months, 3 months, 3.5 months. And so people sort of have these hot takes on Twitter. I get it. But let's keep in mind that Cam Newton's good, but the image I have of Cam Newton is that 2015 Cam Newton. He hasn't been that in years, right? There's a reason why he was why he was cut, while he was out on the market, right? Why? There's a reason for that. That's not to say he's not good anymore, but he has not been that in a while. And if you look at yards per attempt, which I think is, of all the things you can do at quarterback and get super geeky and sort of break it down and do all these things, yards per attempt is really good in terms of predicting success and as a benchmark for how good you are, right? Completion percentage is nonsense, but yards per attempt, right? How big's your bang for your buck, right? He has been below average since 2015. He's only had 3 seasons. I think it's 2011, 2012, and 2015 where he's been above average, right? So to expect him to all of a sudden he signs in June, the week of 4th of July, to expect him to come in and reclaim this top 10 value, right? That is a different bet than saying at quarterback, what he's been this offseason has been a value, right? Those are two very different things. So I think I think it's really important to keep those things in mind, and to really, think about, when you're seeing these debates and seeing all of these, these hot takes and people doing their analysis, and let's keep in mind the range of outcomes, what we're trying to accomplish. Quarterback 33 on the offseason. Prior to the NFL draft, 121.7, his real draft position. So of course that's the actual drafts, not fake mock drafts, the actual real drafts. 140 of them, I believe now. The last check that I had, I believe it was that. 137. There's some that haven't gotten to him that are firing off this week. So, I think I have 140 total in the tracker. There's just some that haven't gotten there. So we'll see. We'll get some quick data. I mean, we will get. I feel pretty confident by tomorrow morning we will have some more data, and give it 24 hours. We will know sort of where the market's going, which again is the value of not having to wait till mid-July to get 4 mock drafts in terms of data, right? That's the value of this system we're building. So, so I mean, quarterback 33, does he go up? Certainly. I mean, I think certainly he's going to jump. He's going to jump Jameis in terms of Jameis is going about a round ahead of him, but was actually behind him in season long, but is going a round ahead of him in terms of post-draft. Rivers is 133, which is 27 spots ahead of where Cam is post-draft. So you expect that to go up. I mean, I'm looking just in terms of quarterbacks here. I mean, Gardner Minshew's at 100. That's 26. Quarterback 26. Teddy Bridgewater is 92. He's quarterback 24 on the offseason. Ryan Tannehill's 84. That's quarterback 22 on the offseason. Just looking up here a little bit more. Darnold's at like 17 for the season. He's at 60. He's basically at 69.9 post-draft. So, I think that's somewhat in that range. If I sort of had to look at him and let's put him in a bucket, I think I think the Stafford, Goff, Rodgers, Matt Ryan bin is an interesting initial salvo and where to shoot it, where to shoot Cam. I think there's a chance that he's not the starter, right? I don't, all of those guys, I have pretty good, well, I have very good confidence they're going to be the 2020 starter. Got high confidence they're going to be the 2021 starter. We don't know that with Cam, right? So I think that's a consideration of where you put him. I'd probably have him behind those guys. The Darnold, Herbert, Garoppolo, Drew Lock, Ryan Tannehill tier. I think he's up there in terms of, Cousins is sort of in that tier too. I'd have him above those guys. But yeah, I think Cam being in that range, so late teens, I think makes some sense in terms of where to draft him. So, we will see. I'm just going to take a quick peek, see where some of these real late drafts are. Maybe we'll even get some data while we're talking in terms of where he goes, because I do have live updating ones here and just see where they're sort of at. Oh, they're in the hundreds. Let's see. Yeah, we should see. He hasn't been drafted in some of these ones yet. Yeah, just looking here just to see, get a quick 136 yesterday about noon. So I think this week we'll get a better understanding because we'll get some full drafts. So we're not getting people that just happen to be on the clock. I'm on the clock in a draft right now. Just sort of waiting. The pick came out, and we were just sort of waiting to see. We just hadn't made a selection yet, so we're waiting to do that. And Cam's going to be the pick. It's the last pick in the draft. It's a start one, but I think there's some equity upside there. So, so we will see in terms of where he's going to go. I think more and more over the next few hours. So, 48 hours, I think we'll have a better understanding. Let's just look at some trades in terms of where he's at pre-trade and sort of get a little bit of a chuckle if we can on some of these. Cam Newton for Jameis Winston plus some blind bidding dollars. That's actually, it would have been a market loss at the time, so that one looks better now. Marvin Jones and Cam Newton for Jared Goff and Latavius Murray. That's start one. Let me filter for 2 QBs really quick here, or super flex and 2 QBs. Virtually nothing here. Cam Newton and Josh Reynolds and 509 for AJ Green, 404 and a future fourth. Cam Newton for 311 and Jonnu Smith. Cam Newton for Gerald Everett and a 2021 third, right? So these are all smashing at this point. Cam Newton and a third for Drew Brees. That one is interesting. It's future second for Cam Newton. So yeah, we're gonna see it go up. Again, I'm not sure how much I'm gonna be buying right now. Would I give a future first? Probably, but I don't think. I do have a little bit of skepticism, right, in terms of him starting, right? We have seen them take shots on people and cut people, right? So we don't know. But he's played 2 games in 2019, right? And wasn't great in 2018, right? And actually wasn't great in 2017 either, right? So the last time he has been above 7 yards per attempt, he was there in 18, but in 19 he wasn't, 17 he wasn't, 16 he wasn't. So the 2015 is the outlier in terms of outlier of yards per attempt and the touchdown rate. It's a classic regression case. Classic. He drops back to about average in terms of everything else and left people that were buying high on him holding the bag. So, I would be skeptical on a huge season especially with all the injury stuff. I mean, if you go back to that 2015 season, he rushed for 10 touchdowns, right? He has rushed for 15 cents, right? So just in terms of, and he rushed for 14 as a rookie. He did have 754 yards on the ground in 2017, right? So, I mean, just in yardage alone, you're getting, almost. He played 16 games, so you're getting 4.5 or so points per game just in terms of rushing yards alone. So he got that year, just rounding it quickly, he got 75 points. He got 36 rushing touchdown points. So he added about 100 points on the ground, right? So we'll see. I do think if you sort of let's piece together some things. I thought that they were a reasonable chance to take a bet on Jalen Hurts in the draft, because we had heard things like, hey, there's things that they want to try at the quarterback position, new age NFL, doing those sorts of more mobility, trying different things that could be push the envelope a little bit. This is a really cheap bet to try that, right? Not committing long-term to try that, but to try it. Josh McDaniels did have Tim Tebow, right? Saw the value in Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow didn't turn out to be great, but he valued that type of quarterback. So I got a fly flying around me. I'm trying to kill it. So I do think that they're going to try and push the envelope. I do think this strikes me a lot like Todd Gurley. There's no reason to hold him back, right? Try it, be aggressive, right? I think that fits really well for this year if he gets the job, right? They've shown some loyalty to Jarrett Stidham. The idea that Jarrett Stidham would get all the way home, 10% of the time these guys get to be fantasy starters, 4th round draft picks, right? That's a low number, right? So there's some mixed signaling going on. We don't know, did they have a tentative agreement in place or any of those things? We don't know that, how long their sort of courtship has gone on. But they've shown that they have some trust in Stidham, and that but they also have interest in Cam Newton. I think Jarrett Stidham is going to be an interesting potential buy candidate. Again, what's the cost, right? Do I think he's locked in to be, I say he's a 10% guy to be a starter. If you get him at a 4% cost, right, that there's value there, right? So there's a difference. There's a difference in those sorts of things. Am I buying him to be a long-term starter? No. If this drops him to be quarterback 40, probably interested, right? I'm taking the hey, we haven't seen it at a Cam side of a bet. That's what that would reflect. So I do think it's an interesting, the Cam value is one thing. I think the tactics of how you go about it is a different side of it too. So So I hope. I hope that helps in terms of giving some initial thoughts at least, and then let's wait. I'm going to do this value series through at least July 15th. They're fun to do for me, and they're relatively easy, and I think they're actionable. So I like to do them. So I'm going to keep doing them through at least July 15th. We'll see what training camp schedule's like and all that stuff. I'm not certain on how we're going to keep rolling content out. I'm being open and flexible at this point. But yeah, so that's what will be in the hopper. So look for probably a Cam Newton Thursday, Friday, something like that once we get some more data. So again, it's probably in the late teens in terms of startup drafting him. I would take Stafford over him, for example. Like if that's the benchmark we're looking at, Stafford and Cousins would be over him, but I think he falls in that tier, that either the back end of that tier or the top end of the next one, however you want to break it down. So I do think there's a gap between them. So I would say he's probably the top end of the next tier for me. So some questions in the chat. Someone did ask, and this is true. I did take Cam Newton in a startup draft, or I did take Jarrett Stidham in a startup draft recently. So that is one thing that I did. In terms of in terms of a selection. I don't remember specifically where I took him. It was, I think, in the 13th, 14th, 15th round, something to that effect. And again, it was a classic. Well, what's the cost, right? Tell me what the cost is. And for me, the cost was, it was a pretty clear bet in terms of what I was taking at that particular point. I said, if he gets through, I don't have to sit around and wait and take a 10% bet, right? If he gets to August and he's a starter, it's a cash out opportunity, right? I don't have to sit and take my poker chip and put it on a 10% bet. That wasn't the type of bet that I was making. I said, listen, I think if he's the starter and shows well enough, like, he could be worth a future first, right? He was quarterback 34 at 1401. So to give you an idea who was going around that range for me, Jalen Hurts was going, he went 1501. MFL makes these quarterbacks in pink. It's impossible to read. Jalen Hurts was quarterback 35, so right after him, a full round later. Nick Foles was quarterback 36, about 20 picks later. Tyrod Taylor, about 24 picks later, quarterback 37. Again, you're in the Mariota, Fitzpatrick, Trubisky, Andy Dalton range of the draft. I mean, that's the quarterbacks that were going after him. To give you an idea, Winston went ahead of him. Cam actually went ahead of him. Haskins went ahead of him. Minshew, right? So I was basically collecting residual value on what I thought was going to be a week one starter. And yeah, I would do that again, right? I think in terms of what the value cash out would have been, I think it was the right bet. And you make the right bet, you write down why you think you made the right bet at that time, have that, anchored in your brain, and then see how it turns out. It's not necessarily that this one probably broke the wrong way for me, but again, at that particular, is that the right bet? Would I do that again? With the information I knew at the time in terms of potential cash out opportunity, yeah, I would. Right. So I do think the cost at which you get a player depends a lot. Tell me what the cost is and I'll tell you what my interest is. I'll never say I'm out on a player. I'm out on players at cost. Jarrett Stidham was a great example of that. So, all right. So I think that pretty much wraps up the Cam Newton discussion. We could go on, but this is why Analytics at Dynasty, the 2020 edition, I think is valuable, right? Because understanding these rates, understanding these concepts, these profiles, right? Players are profiles, right? We should think of the profile of players and then use players to basically implement that profile, right? We should look for profiles and then take identify successful profiles and then find players that reflect them. Cam Newton was one at a discount. Jameis Winston was one at a discount. Jarrett Stidham at a discount, right? I was making a little bit different bet than a full-fledged starter. I was making a 3 to 4 month bet in terms of potentially cashing him out. So, all right. So let's put a pin in that one. Check back later this week for Cam Newton update. But yes, Express 98, I did take him. It was a 10% bet and I rolled the 90% side of that. So, all right. So that wraps up Cam Newton. I put this in the Patreon. Joe put in the comments here. Again, feel free to comment. Put your comments in the show notes here in the YouTube stream, or the YouTube comments, I should say, and I can answer them. there. I can also get them, in the Patreon show, and go from there. I do have this fly flying around my face, so if you're on the live stream and see me swat, sorry. So would love to hear your thoughts on Nuke. Seems to have really dropped since the trade. Is he a buy candidate? I haven't seen him. He's down about 3 spots post draft, which I wasn't exactly when the trade happened, but it was close in terms of where the data would be. So it's not a big move. You start to see guys at that age tend to dip a little bit in cost. Is that right? I do think there's some value in betting against the wide receiver decline, age-based decline narrative. But is that the right thing to do in a startup draft? Right, that's a little bit different of a conversation. He would be, if he's going to be a buy, if he's going to be a buy low in an existing league, that might be a different way to exploit the narrative news on him. Maybe I'll do a trade show on him in the coming days here, in terms of looking at him. But I mean, I'm just looking here at a couple of them. DeAndre Hopkins and Sony Michel for Alexander Madison, Marquise Brown, a first and a second. So that's pretty cheap. DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Jack Doyle for Juju Smith-Schuster, first, a second, and a third next year. Again, that's pretty cheap, I would say, in terms of if you give AJ Green the second. That's basically, let's proxy that and say it's Juju and a first for DeAndre Hopkins. So, you might take the Juju side of that one. So Jarvis Landry, Deebo Samuel, a first next year for DeAndre Hopkins. Market value wise, that feels like a loss, although I do like Landry more. I'd probably take the Hopkins side of that one. Hopkins for Ronald Jones in 102. That's start one. So if that's Jonathan Taylor, it's a different conversation than if you're taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire for me. DeAndre Hopkins for DJ Shark, Calvin Ridley, and Preston Williams. Give me the Hopkins side of that. So those are just some recent ones. DeAndre Hopkins for Darren Waller, 106 and 406. That's start one. So you figure there's a better than 50% shot that that's a running back at that 106 spot. Jerick McKinnon, Terry McLaurin, and a future second for DeAndre Hopkins and David Johnson. I mean, I would break my keyboard accepting. So yeah, there's some. I would say he's not super high volume in terms of trades. I look at these and sort of see what the pace at which players are being traded as an indicator of what the market is like. I see, I think the guys that are higher volume traded tend to be ones that you have a little bit different value you can actually exploit in a trade. The 2 a day guys, that the guys that are in there that have 50, 60 trades in June, right? Those are the ones that I think are more in play in terms of being traded, where there's some market value differences. So he's a little bit behind that, but he might be an explorer candidate. At some of those costs, I would buy him. Is he the right guy to draft? I tend to think you can fade him in a startup draft if he's going in the early second, because you could go running back there and get wide receivers later on that would otherwise be going in that range in different years. So I think that's a balancing point. So, all right. So Tyler did send in some questions. Let me grab them here. I did see a quote, and I'm going to write about this. This is I think a great quote. I'm going to incorporate this into 3.0. Cade Massey, he's a professor at UPenn. He wrote, on a podcast back in February, he said, "This is the challenge with base rates. When you pay a lot of attention or you're a real expert, you have additional information to bring to the base rate. why settle for using the base rate when I have all this information? That's a trap. We can all get pulled into that trap. I think that's so true in terms of in terms of what some of the analysis that we see. All right, so Tyler did send in some questions. Stacking players is often used in DFS. Yes. Is it something we should think about more in Dynasty? Definitely tougher to execute in Dynasty, but seems like it makes sense to capture big weeks. I virtually agree with all of that. And so I'll do this a little bit in season. I remember last year, I think it was week 14. It was either I had to get it. It was a win and in situation, and I was an underdog, or it was week 14 where I was an underdog. And for example, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I stacked him in Gesicki, right? Because I said I need to basically punch above my weight in terms of I think I'm going to lose, but I need things to break right for me. So if one thing breaks right for me, let's double that. So that's some of it. I would say play Dynasty, right? Play your Dynasty strategies, right? Don't go out of your way to stack if it's a Dynasty loss, right? I'm not going to take I'm not going to take Patrick Mahomes and then select Mecole Hardman 4 rounds above ADP, so I have them stacked, right? I think it's not what I would do. But for example, if I had Matt Stafford and Marvin Jones was out there available, stacking them together, especially in an existing league where he's cheap, right? Or if he falls in a startup draft, right? That might be a tie-breaking situation. So I agree with that. A different way to think about it would be, hey, if I go DeAndre Hopkins or if I go Dak Prescott in the first round, and then the third round rolls around, and I'm deciding between, I don't know, Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, maybe, or DJ Moore, someone in that range. Should I break ties in favor of Amari Cooper there, right? I don't mind doing that. Some people avoid that because they're scared of downside and risk. I tend to be let's capture upside because that's what wins you championships. So I'm fine doing. I would be fine doing that. I think that's a fine thing. I think it's more of not necessarily a conscious objective set out to do that as a draft strategy, but I think it makes sense to use it as a tie-breaking scenario. So if you're putting together a board and saying, listen, if Dak here, and I've talked about this a lot, which is 3, 4, 5, 6, write them down in terms of draft strategies. I found a ton of value in this in the last draft that we did. Chad Parsons and I did an FFPC draft. We'll finish recapping it on the Football Guy show this week. But we legit went round by round. We were at the turn, so it was really easy to do in terms of, hey, listen, here's 10 guys that we think might be in play for us. How does that look, right? So this is a running back range, this is a tight end range, this is a quarterback range. And it sort of developed, and we sort of had a plan, right? So we said, listen, if things alter a little bit, where wide receiver value falls to us early or running back value falls to us early, what sort of contingencies can we build into our plan to allow us to do that, right? So I think doing stacking as part of a strategy, incorporating that into a draft plan in terms of some different contingency options makes a lot of sense. So if Dak late first round in super flex, then Amari Cooper third round, take him, right? I think that makes some sense. And again, if if Deshaun Watson, then maybe it's Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks, right? Later, and you can sort of do those things and sort of build that into a strategy. I think that's fine. I would only want to do it with guys that I think are good dynasty assets, right? I wouldn't do it for stack. I wouldn't stack for stacking's sake, because I think it would be, if you're taking suboptimal bets on the player to be the stack, if it's can't think of a great one offhand. But like if you got a quarterback and you're taking a receiver that you don't necessarily like, or you think is overvalued, for example, maybe you take Kyler Murray and you want to run it back with Christian Kirk. I don't love that per se, right? So I think those are it's a little bit different of a debate. But if you went, Kyler Murray in the first round and DeAndre Hopkins in the second, right, that would be interesting. So again, it's I want the profile to be good. If it aligns with the quarterback, I'm fine doing that and breaking ties in the direction of the stack. Tyler also asked, do you think by going running back early this year that it takes away from the impact that injury away backs may have on your roster? On the other hand, you can look at it as you're keeping these players away from other teams and protecting yourself from injury. If you go volume running back, you're safer in terms of the injuries, right? You have more options. It hurts more when you do that at expensive rates, right? So when it's a high value player that gets hurt, that hurts more, just naturally. I do think this year you can go early. Again, its profiles are really important, but I think that there are profiles this year that warrant going early at running back. So Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor and some of these guys earlier on. I've been in on Nick Chubb earlier on. I think some of these guys earlier. Again, this is a year where there's wide receiver value that's falling to places it's never fallen in the. I remember when I first started, like in 2012, I got Dez Bryant in like the 4th or 5th round of a startup draft. Like that was my first one. I don't remember like values like this falling since then. So you are getting opportunities to go at wide receiver values that haven't happened, right? So I do think you can go early. I would still want to, as part of going running back early this year, I would want to sort of still go running back volume late, right? So figure out a way to get inside your line at wide receivers, whatever comfort that level is, right? Whether it's 4 or 5 ones you feel really good about, but that 4th or 5th one might be wide receiver 35 or wide receiver 40 this year, specific ones. Whereas in prior years, to get to that level of comfort, it would have been at wide receiver 26, right? I mean, that's what we're sort of the market we're dealing with, and thinking about how those things interplay. I think that's really important, but I still want to be inside the line so I can go volume running back late. I think we're at a lot of risk in terms of, I think running back volume is the strategy every year, but I think it's this one, it could be really combustible in terms of that being a very high level outcome this year. So do you think that it will be important in 2021 to roster 3 quarterbacks because of 2 bye weeks and superflex formats? I thought that, I just want to check this. I wasn't sure that there won't be an extra bye week to compensate for the extra game, nor will every team play one neutral site game, is what the report from NBC Sports, the most recent thing on the 2021 season. So it doesn't look like there's going to be an extra season in there or an extra bye week in there. They're going to play basically a 18-week season without an additional bye. So they're just going to basically tack on one more game. We can talk about the appropriateness of that. So no, it wouldn't really impact me much. I'll have to think about how to move around warp and adjust for those things. And that's going to be an interesting exercise because it's going to change those values. So I have to think about how to sort of adjust for it. So, all right. Well, that's pretty much, I think that's everything that we have in terms of questions. Yeah, lots of questions about Cam, so that'll cover that. I think that's it in terms of questions for this week. So again, we'll be doing some of the stuff again. If you're not in the group me, it's a great resource. So, I can't recommend enough in terms of the conversations and stuff. I was away from my phone a little bit. I came back and was brought way up to speed on some different strategy things that were going on. So it was a great. It's a really good resource. So if you're not a champion patron, can't recommend that highly enough in terms of the intelligence of the owners in there. I'm smarter every time I log in and start talking with and reading the stuff that people are writing. It's a great resource. One other thing too, the Patreon rewards program, so the Analytics Dynasty rewards program. Again, if you bring a friend in terms of buy a book or a Patreon subscription, you earn for that. So if you know someone that is thinking about the book, tell them buy the book, put my name in there, you start earning rewards. I've got some different levels in there. The bandanas are much needed. As you can, if you're watching the videos, you can tell from what's going on my head. So I do have Analytics at Dynasty bandanas. It was a joke from the draft time, but I'm still on board with it. It is, they will. That's a reward at $50 worth of rewards. I do have the option for a strategy session, so we'll get together for a half hour at $100, and then if you we'll co-own a team if you get 250. So we'll get together, I'll pay, we'll split the winnings, and we'll co-own it. So all of those things in terms of rewards are there. So if you have a friend or if you know people, I know it can be tough sometimes to sort of give away what you think might be a little bit of an edge. But if you have a friend that you don't play in leagues with or whatever, recommend that, and you can earn for it. So all right, well, that will do it for this week. Until next time, continue embracing the variance, and we will talk again soon.